Formula One news fans. This is the Formula One News Hour. I'm Jonathan Steele, your host, and we have a quiet week this week. There is no race, but we've got a nice interview that I did with a podcaster from Poland. In fact, he's, as we're the only North American podcast, he's the only Polish podcast. He's been at it about 5 or 6 years, I think, and got a really nice following over there. So we have that. We have a little bit of news and my opinion on the news. And then, of course, we have the history to start with. This week it's Jack Brabham, an Australian driver that was Formula One champion 3 times. And then preparing, of course, for next week for the race from Brazil. We only have 2 races left in the season, and then we are done for the year. But the Formula One News Hour will continue to come to you. We made a number of connections while we were at the race here in Austin, Texas, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so we've lined up a number of interviews with some past, actually mostly past Formula One drivers and teams and things like that. Staying consistent with our message of we want to bring to you not just the races themselves and the big names all the time, but we want to try and give you a behind the scenes look at Formula One racing and what it's taken over the years, the last 50, 60 years, to actually more than 60 years now, to see how Formula One has evolved through the years and what the racing cars are like today versus yesterday. Let's start with our sponsor for this section, and that would be Give, Send, Go. Folks, you can't help what happens to you in life, but you can help who you choose to help you get through bad things when they do happen. And bad things happen to most of us. You're looking at somebody that a lot of bad things have happened to in my life, but also a lot of good things. And I think that's pretty much the same for everybody that's alive today. But Give, Send, Go is a crowdfunding entity that does not have any censorship. They're a good Christian organization, and they just want to help people. They just want to help you or your friends get through the tough times by lining you up with other folks out there who want to give and support to people that's gone through some tough times. If you remember Kyle Rittenhouse earlier in the year when he was accused of murder, and it turns out, of course, that he was found innocent. Kyle Rittenhouse had a lot of money raised to help with his defense by Give, Send, Go, after the other crowdfunding entity refused to help him because they said that, anyway, they had their own opinion. Give, Send, Go does not get involved with opinions or censorship or stuff like that. So when you've got crowdfunding to help someone, or you might want to start a business and you just want to raise some money for a good idea you have, then think of Give, Send, Go. That's GiveSendGo.com. GiveSendGo.com. Okay, so as I mentioned, our history section this week is on the Australian driver Jack Brabham, who was born on April 2nd, 1926, and died on May the 9th, 2014. So a racing driver from the 50s and 60s that managed to live through it all and lived to be a ripe old age, and died actually of liver disease at the age of 88 years old. Very, very interesting guy. He was a mechanic in the Royal Air Force in Australia, and on the side of that he ran a little engineering shop, and so he decided that he wanted to get into racing when he was actually a little later in life. He was actually 24 years old, and he started in midget car racing down there in Australia before heading up north to Europe, or the UK actually. But there's something I want you to notice about Jack Brabham and Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart and Bruce McLaren. A lot of the guys from that era, they all really understood mechanics. They understood engines. They understood a lot about the cars they were driving versus today. And the reason that that was important was because really they were the sensors, as it were, that was sending information back to the team on adjustments to make to the cars and everything. Today those sensors are electronic sensors. And so all of the information that is being sent back to the team today is done electronically. Back in those days, at the end of a race, they would sit down and they'd sit down with the crew, the mechanics and the engineers, and they'd tell them how the car felt like going into this corner, what happened when they tried to accelerate too fast, how the brakes were grabbing too much here or too much there. So there's a lot of information that went from the drivers back to the teams to make the cars better. And as we've already discussed many times, the cars were terribly unreliable back then. You know, most of the races were won by guys whose cars didn't break or didn't crash or something like the tires didn't fly apart. So winning races back then really was much more quote unquote of a team effort than it is today. Remember back to what I said, Juan Fangio said, where the team is 65% responsible and the driver 35%, and that over time that gap would narrow. And as we found out talking to the drivers at COTA here in Austin, the honest ones put that at right 90 to the team and 10% to the driver. And part of that, the reason that gap closed so much is because now the teams get instantaneous feedback that they used to have to wait to get back from the driver. So the teams can actually make adjustments to the brakes, to the cars, to the differential, to the transmission. They can make all these adjustments while the car's flying around the track. Whereas before, in the times of in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, there was a lot of feedback from the driver to the teams that contributed to the success of the car and the team. And so that's, I think, where Juan Fangio was really coming from when he said 65-35, because the driver was giving the feedback and the team was putting that feedback into the car. Today the drivers don't give much feedback at all. They say either my tires are wearing or my grip's not good, or every now and then you'll hear them say, my brake pedal's hard, or this is that. But all of the real information that the team needs to make the car win is actually coming back electronically through all the sensors on the car. Anyway, back to Jack Brabham, a very, very distinguished driver. He gained his knighthood in the 1970s, I think it was, 78, when he gained his knighthood from the Queen and became Sir Jack Brabham, and we got Sir Jackie Stewart and we got Sir Lewis Hamilton. But back to the cars and the thing of Jack Brabham. Jack Brabham was your real mechanic, engineer, driver, all in one. And when he got to England, what he was doing was he was going in and started driving for Cooper cars. If you notice, that's a name that has come up regularly in our history section. And in fact, Jack Brabham would win the Formula One World Championship 3 times, twice with Cooper or a Cooper derivative, but also he's the only driver to win a World Championship. Or I should say the first driver to win the World Championship, because Bruce McLaren also won the World Championship driving their own car. So it didn't happen very often. It hasn't really happened since. Maybe once or twice, but really for the most part, the drivers drive and the cars are owned by companies and things like that, so that they can be focused on one or the other. So Brabham, like I said, won one of his 3 world championships driving in his own car. He did drive in, of course, the Le Mans. Didn't have a lot of success in Le Mans, and really, if you look about the number of years that he drove, he had most of his success in Formula One. He was the first driver to enter a rear-engine car into the Indy 500. That was in 1959. And just to give you some idea of how the handling and things like that is affected by where the engine is and how much the engine weighs. At the time he entered his car into, which was a Cooper by the way, into the race at the Indy 500, he was running a 268 horsepower engine versus the front engine cars that were running 430 horsepower engines. Now here's another interesting thing, is that the difference in his speed between the front engine car and the rear engine car during qualifying, he qualified 17th and would go on to finish 9th in that race. But the difference was only 2 miles per hour. And the reason for that was that on the straightaways, the big powerful engines, of course, got much faster down the straightaways, but they were much slower through the corners and the short straightaways. So on the front and back straightaway, which are long, he was lost ground to them, but he made a lot of that ground up. And in fact, coming in 9th, of course, he more than made up for that ground on the corners. So within 5 years of that, just about every car that entered the Indy 500 then was rear-engined. And if you go back to my history lessons, if you remember, it is the Jim Clark that won both the Formula One World Championship and the Indy 500 back in 1965. So during his time in racing, it was a kind of semi-success, semi-driver, semi-designer, semi-builder, semi-car owner. Brabham Racing went on long after Jack Brabham finished his career in racing. He was pretty much done with Formula One racing by about 1970 and was pretty much out of racing altogether as a driver, within that decade. He would still enter saloon car races. He would still enter, as an example, the Le Mans 24-hour race and things like that. But for the most part, he was finished with his racing career by the 1970s. But incidentally, as he didn't really get a start in Formula One until he was 29, then he was actually 44 years old when he finished his Formula One racing career. Over the years, if you look at Jackie Stewart, who was probably 32, 33, when he finished, a lot of the drivers finished in their early 30s. Today they're going much longer. You've got Vettel and you've got Alonso that are both in their late 30s, early 40s. I think Alonso's 41. Vettel's 42. This is Vettel's last year, but Alonso's going on. You got Lewis Hamilton, who said he's still going to race for another, 2 to 3, 4 years, and he's 38. So we're starting to see those ages climb back up. But a lot of guys in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, of course, retired early. And the number one reason was that once they got families, started a family and had children, they wanted to get out because they knew the chances of surviving in those days was not good. We've talked many times about the reliability of the cars and how dangerous they were. What's really interesting is that really Jack Brabham only had really two we would call serious accidents. One where he got thrown out of his car, but he managed to really get up and walk away from that. On another one, he ended up with a serious foot injury that put him out of driving for about 4 to 5 months. But other than that, he went on to have a fairly, what we would call, error-free and wreck-free career. They had lots of races where the cars didn't finish. In one case, he was, he was like all these guys, serious competitor. He pushed his car over the finish line and those kinds of things. But for the most part, he escaped the serious accidents and serious wrecks that both took other drivers' lives or ended their careers because of very serious injuries. He was part of the reason that Jochen Rindt actually won the 1970 Formula One championship posthumously. He was actually leading the races by about 4 or 5 points when Jochen died, and he pulled out of his final races for those years. And if you remember, Emerson Fittipaldi went on to beat Jackie Ickx, which gave Jochen Rindt the championship. So one of the things that you notice as I'm telling you these stories about the history, especially during that era, these guys were good friends. They traveled together. A lot of them lived together. Their families stayed together. They partied together. It was a very, very close knit of drivers and teams. And remember, the teams weren't like they are now. A team would be maybe 4, 5, 6 guys, 7 guys. And all of them worked at the factory, and all of them went on the road together, and they just worked together. Now, if you look at just the tire changes on the teams today, you have about 14 guys just changing tires. 3 on each wheel, and then you got the one guy that's kind of organizing everything, and you've got a guy that's he's a signal maker. I mean, it's just crazy the number of people it takes now to make a typical Formula One team. These guys, before the budget caps came in, these guys had 300 employees building one car. Yeah, it was okay. So they're building 2 or 3 cars, but essentially they're building one car to go and be the fastest and the most reliable on a racetrack at the weekend. So Jack Brabham, during his time, he was fairly successful at the Tasman Series. Came in 2nd twice. And 5th one time. He enjoyed racing down in Australia, being Australian. In fact, when he finished racing and finished being involved with racing, he went back to Australia and retired, quote unquote, from racing. But he bought himself some car dealerships and got a couple of engineering companies. He was building race cars for other people, Formula 2 and sports car racing cars for folks. So although he quote unquote finished what he termed his activity level in Formula One racing, when he moved back to Australia, of course he couldn't stay out of it. He had bought himself a ranch. Unfortunately, he divorced his first wife in 1994, and then married his second wife in 1995. Now, why he would divorce his wife when he's had to have been 70, 72 years old, I don't know. If you think that I think they'd been married for 43 years, you'd think that after being married for 43 years, he could find some way to help solve their problems. She'd gone through all the really tough times. Formula One or any type of road racing, car racing is really tough on the wives and the family, because they don't know I guess it's like being a police officer. They don't know when they go to work that day whether they're going to come home. So it's a very stressful time for the families. So they made it through that, and then ultimately they divorced. He had 3 sons, and all 3 sons had some participation in Formula One, in Indy car racing and things like that. Obviously haven't met with the same success as their dad, because you don't hear about them so much, but I do remember his son Jeff, who partook in the Indy Racing League and raced at the Indianapolis about 4 or 5 times. I do remember that and watching him on TV. So he's did quite well, and now he's got a grandson that is coming up through after getting out of karting. Have you noticed now that they're not mechanics, they're not anything this anymore? They get into go-karts, and then they go learn to drive race cars. So it's really, really interesting. This portion of the Formula One News Hour's history section has been brought to you by Phenology. We've talked a lot about the amount of data these cars pump out, and where you need somewhere to store that data, and that data is a data center. And the data center of choice for a lot of folks is Phenology. Phenology's in Austin, Texas. It's privately owned. It's got a public cloud, a private cloud, provides co-location, disaster recovery systems. So if you've got a website you want to build, you want to host, then Phenology is the place to go. You got some servers you want to host somewhere, then Phenology is the place to go. If you're a company and you want to have all of your folks working from a cloud, private cloud, then Phenology is the place to go. Go to phenology.com. That is phenology.com. A little bit of controversy going on this week, and my thoughts on it. The controversy that's going around, if you remember, is that Max Verstappen and the whole Red Bull team have boycotted talking to Sky Sports because of one of the reporters, Ted Kravitz, referring to Lewis Hamilton being cheated out of his 8th Formula One World Championship, because in his opinion Max Verstappen should not have been allowed to have won that race. And in the truest sense of the word, and the form and the rules, if the rules had been strictly followed, then Max Verstappen would not have run that race, because they would have run out of time. But you've got to look at the whole year in its entirety and start thinking about, well, should Lewis Hamilton really have been that close in the points, or even been leading in the points? Because if you go back, there was at least 2 races where Lewis Hamilton literally took Max Verstappen out of the race. And the most obvious one, and the one that he was penalized 10 seconds for, was the British Grand Prix. If you remember, in that first or second corner at the British Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton literally took Max Verstappen out of the race. And so if you took those 25 points away from Lewis Hamilton, then at the end of Abu Dhabi, it just wouldn't matter. And there was one other race before that. I can't remember exactly which race it was, but there was one other race before that in the same thing, where Lewis Hamilton had taken Max Verstappen out of the race. Another 25 potential points gone. So right there's 50 points. So at the end of the race, Lewis Hamilton was leading by about 8 points. He should not have even been close. If the rules had really played out, and they were, we're not saying the rules didn't, but if Lewis Hamilton hadn't taken Max Verstappen out of those 2 races, then the points would not have even been close. Now, I know there was a race where it could be argued that Max Verstappen took Lewis Hamilton out, or it could be argued that Lewis Hamilton took Max Verstappen out. Either way, you can give that race a toss-up. And in fact, the stewards did the same thing. I think they did penalize Max Verstappen, but when you watch it, it's what I would call a racing accident. They both ran into each other going into the turn. Whereas certainly the British Grand Prix was a deliberate move by Lewis Hamilton to hinder Max Verstappen through that corner. And the same in the race before that, where they touched wheels and off they went. So in my opinion, you can't say that Max Verstappen cheated Lewis Hamilton out of the championship, because he should never have even been in the points race had everything been fair and square throughout the entire year. But on the other hand, to blame Max Verstappen for what happened at the end of the race, or even Red Bull, it's ludicrous, because the guy that made those decisions, Michael Massey, did not follow the rules properly. But if you watch a lot of these races, a lot of the time, it's like Michael Massey said when he let it go. He said, it's what's called a car race. So in all things going on when you're racing and things like that, now there's different things when there's deliberate maneuvers made to hinder another driver, or there's different maneuvers made, to do things to another team. One incident came up this year where it's thought that Hannah Schmidt deliberately had Yuki Tsunoda spin out so that Max Verstappen could get a tire change. And that may well have been, but that's part of the strategy of making sure your guy wins. So there's nothing fair and square about Formula One, and that never will be. There'll always be people on the fringes trying to get their guy or their person out and into the winner's circle. So anyway, that's my opinion. Hope you can either agree or disagree, and by all means send comments. You can always email me. That would be jsteele@f1nh.com. And as there's no second part to this video, we've already, as I said, recorded the second half for this week. We've got to go ahead and remember to thank our producer and technical guru, Andre Kuhn, who there's been a few mishaps during the recording of this particular session, and Andre will go in there and make sure they're all fixed, and you'll never know they happened. And so a big thank you to Andre Kuhn for all of his hard work. So next week we have the Brazilian Grand Prix, and if you remember last year it was quite a thrilling race because it was actually the race that ended up putting Lewis Hamilton a few points ahead in the Drivers' Championship. I think it was about 8 points. So in order for Max Verstappen to become world champion, he had to win that race. And of course, it's all past us now, and of course, Lewis went on and won the race, albeit by different circumstances. Let's just put it that way. But he won the race. The team called a brilliant strategy at the end of that race. If Lewis Hamilton had come in and put on a new set of soft tires, guess what? He would have gone out in the lead, and Max Verstappen would not have passed him. What happened was Max Verstappen's strategist was quick on the marks, and as soon as that strategist saw that yellow safety car come out, a virtual safety car, brought him in for tires because they had that 12 seconds to spare, got him on a fresh set of soft tires so that he could go out and really challenge Lewis Hamilton, who was on a set of really old tires and didn't have the grip that Max Verstappen had. But if Mercedes had done the same thing as Lewis Hamilton, for Lewis Hamilton as Red Bull did for Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton would have won that race. So until next weekend and the Brazilian Grand Prix, I'm Jonathan Steele and look forward to seeing you next week. Welcome Formula One fans, welcome to the Formula One News Hour. I'm Jonathan Steele, your host, and we're today at the COTA racetrack in Austin, Texas, and you can hear the cars behind us. We have a vintage Formula One race going on right now, so the cars that I kind of grew up with and learned to love. And we have a really special guest with us today because as we are the only North American podcast for Formula One, we have our good friend from Poland, who also, I'm assuming, is the only Formula One podcast from Poland. And let me go ahead and have him introduce himself. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Bartosz Budnik. Hello everybody, and I'm co-host because I have another Bartosz having this podcast with me of a podcast called Budnik Pokrzywiński, which is our two surnames together. And I think we are the only one podcast in Poland currently that talks about Formula One, and for sure we are the only podcasters from Poland that comes to Formula One.
Great. So two forward-thinking entities here. But so first, let me ask you this: in Poland, how big is Formula One in Poland?
Well, it's growing again because Formula One in Poland and its popularity was very close together with career of our the only one Formula One driver, Robert Kubica. So before 2006, because Robert debuted half season 2006.
Yes.
Before 2006, it was like a niche only for gentlemen.
Yes.
We had very big popularity of speedway at that time in Poland and that kind of sports, but not Formula One. we had, I believe, more fans of rallies than the races in Poland, to be strong on rally league. And then Robert Kubica came in 2006 mid-season, popularity went up until his unfortunate crash after 2010 season. We had this Formula One failing, and right now when we had the, let's call it second stint of Robert Kubica's career in 2018-19, because both seasons he was very close to Formula One and he raced in Formula One, we had another peak. But after that peak, Formula One is growing still, even though Robert Kubica is not very close to it anymore, because Netflix does his job, and Formula One is getting more popular at younger audience, which is something that was not very popular before, and especially if you consider that plenty of young ladies are watching Formula One with their boyfriends, which is very good.
Well, and talking of young ladies, back, I guess until about 10 years ago, we used to have the Formula One girls, right? So every Formula One race, you'd have the whole, kind of like we have the cheerleaders here in football.
We call it grid girls.
Grid girls, yes. Yeah. We used to have the Formula One grid girls. Of course, today now they've gone because I don't know why, but it's a sad thing that they've gone. But let's go back to Formula One and motor racing in particular. So, the Formula One guys, when I was growing up, most of them started driving in rally cars and sports cars and other types of race cars before they ever made it to Formula One cars. And today, of course, they start karting. If you don't grow up in karting, you're not going to make it to Formula One. So maybe tell us a little about some of the other motorsports that are going on in Poland, and is karting big in Poland? So that we can bring up some young drivers to be Formula One drivers.
No, it's not. Unfortunately, and we are trying to make it more popular, the karting, because as you mentioned, Jonathan, this is the only way potentially to go to Formula One right now.
Today, yes.
Yes. So we, as a society close to Formula One, try to, let's say, force our big companies and sponsorship companies to invest in karting and young talents. But it's very, very hard in Poland, because Poland doesn't have that kind of automotive traditions that, for example, Germany has got, or the northern countries like Sweden and even Norway, or the Netherlands. Let's say right now we have 2 Formula One drivers. Poland is like not very good at motorsport, apart from the speedway I've mentioned before.
Right.
Because speedway was a really big thing in Poland, and I believe there was some times when Poland has got the strongest speedway league in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was true. And we had right now we had a guy who is 3-time world champion at speedway, which is something big for us. Bartosz Budnik, and we had one world champion before, Tomasz Golob. He's from my city. He's one of the most popular person in my city where I come from. Okay. So speedway, but unfortunately not very strong automotive car racing, apart from rally, because Rally of Poland used to be part of WRC, World Rally Championship, and we have plenty of rally drivers. Rallying in Poland, I think, it's easier than racing. It's easier than racing, yes. Which is not very good, but it's cheaper than to go racing.
It is. And from my background, where I lived and grew up, we used to have what they call the RAC rally come through there. So, which is probably what got me started. When I was 11, 12 years old, getting really interested in Formula One. But let's come back to today's Formula One racers and teams. Who in Poland would you say is the most popular? Is it Mercedes? Is it Red Bull? Is it Ferrari? Is it McLaren? Who would you say is the most popular Formula One team in Poland today?
It's very diversified, and we haven't got any strong fans of any of the teams.
Okay.
As we used to have when we had Robert Kubica racing.
Right.
When he was racing, everybody followed his team. So it was BMW Sauber, then it was Renault, then it was meant to be Lotus Renault, when the Kimi came back and all that stuff. And then Robert Kubica, I'm not sure if you know, guys, but he was actually signed to race for Ferrari for next year from 2012. But he didn't make it. But he didn't make it. He confirmed that at the Beyond the Grid podcast that he was signed for the next year, but he had a rally crash because Poles love to rally, and he also loves rallying. I believe currently we have very strong Red Bull fan base growing up in Poland because of Max, but even before Max's success, because being a fan of a winner, let's say Mercedes, is very easy. So everybody thinks that if somebody is winning from year to year, you want to be fan of somebody else so you can grow with that success together. McLaren has got big fan base in Poland, and of course Ferrari, because Ferrari is one of the red cars or symbol of sports cars in Poland. So these are the strongest bases, I think, fan bases.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get involved in following Formula One and forming a Formula One podcast?
I was born in 1990, so I'm 32 years old, and since I was adult, so when I reached the 18 years old, I could work. I started to work as an automotive journalist. I was typing articles, testing the cars, and I was studying at the same time journalism. And I quit that, let's say, car testing thing. I started regular 9-to-5 job at IT to earn better money. But then the Formula One was with me since I was 16 years old. So I'm a child of the first career of Robert Kubica, 2006. I'm a child of that success there as well. Because it made Formula One, it bring Formula One to our television, TV at home. Because before that, you could not watch Formula One in Poland so easy as when Robert Kubica joined. And 2018, me and my colleague, we met each other when we were studying journalism, decided to go for YouTube. I wanted to do something with cars, he wanted to do something with sports, and two of us each other, when we were doing our university times, we loved watching Formula One together, we love karting together, and we love plenty of discussion we have, because me and we are good talkers and we talk a lot. So we said, hey, let's do the podcast because it's the easier from a technical point of view. You just need two guys talking. And well, we can talk hours about Formula One, so let's just record our thing that we talk. And since 2018, we've grown very quickly, surprisingly quick. We had our own website right now called Park Fermé. The website brought me here. And we are covering IndyCar for the Viaplay television in Poland as well as a commentator.
Very interesting.
So that kind of commentator cabins are very familiar to me.
Yeah, very good. So, you've been doing it now, what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, it's fourth year, I think.
Fourth year, very good. So we're into about our what, fourth month? So
it will come.
Yeah. We believe we're starting to get a nice following. But so in the years that you've been doing it, is this your first time in Austin, Texas?
Yes, it is, and because of the pandemic, because started 2019, we were growing, and we started to, let's say, get fans or followers. 2020 was pandemic time when we wanted to go racing, and we had a crowdfunding. Patronage. Because of the crowdfunding, I'm here basically because I don't have to pay it by myself. My patrons, thank you so much, guys, are paying for me being here and allow me that thing. So 2020-2021 was pandemic time. We couldn't go anywhere. We went for the DTM racing, Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters, in Germany. Robert Kubica was riding there. It was a good opportunity to go see the racing for the first time. Then we went because a friend of ours has got the European Le Mans Series racing team. And they race at WEC and Le Mans, so we went with them for Belgium last year. And this year, when we got a green light to go for Formula One, we went. Our portal went 13 races so far. We allow our other riders to go there. So I've been personally to precision testing at Spain. I went to Austria. I went here, and I'm here right now. And I'm going to Abu Dhabi as well.
Okay. Very nice.
And my other mates were in almost every single race, including Singapore. We had
you had somebody in Singapore?
Traveling from Poland to Singapore last time.
Well, I spent not a great amount of time, but some time in Abu Dhabi and another life. A very nice place to be. You meet lots of rich people there in Abu Dhabi.
We meet lots of rich people in Texas.
Yeah, you meet a lot of rich people.
I've met Pagani Park at the parking, which it's not. You cannot see Pagani in the road in Poland. It's like something special.
Yeah, the Pagani that was out there yesterday. So give us kind of a feel of your experience here in Austin, Texas, versus say you went to Spain. Yeah, you said so. Compare the two experiences. As a journalist and then as a visitor, do you find that you have more freedom here to move wherever you want as a journalist compared to Spain, or is it everything about the same?
Funny thing that you mentioned the freedom, because that's true and that's a right call. I mean, Formula One in Europe, European races are a little bit more strict than here in the States. I mean, it's not so easy to get in. You have to really try to be accredited, and I mean really try, and really follow the rules, the path that are strict rules around Formula One for journalists, and we are following them. But here, everything seems to be a little bit more American, a little bit more freedom, which is, I believe, better. We have plenty of local media, which is great, because I'm a bit jealous, because you guys right now are having a podcast about Formula One in USA, and Formula One is growing in USA, and I'm pretty sure that American audience will look for guys like you to help interpret what's going on around this world. So this is the best moment. So in terms of freedom, yes, I think Formula One, as I said to you last time, Formula One needs more USA insights, because Formula One can benefit from that, and I'm very happy we'll have 3 races in America next year.
And you know, Formula One here in Austin, Texas, I think probably the first year there was probably 50,000-60,000 people that showed up here, and I think this year we're expecting north of 300,000. So
I've heard on the radio 420,000 for the whole weekend.
For the whole weekend,
I've heard on the country radio I'm listening on my car.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So so when you think about that, it has grown exponentially. Now we kind of believe that a lot of that interest has been generated, and I think you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. The Netflix series Drive to Survive.
Yes.
I think it's had a huge impact over here. You get Drive to Survive in Poland?
Of course we do. Yeah.
So a lot of Polish people speak English, or
yes.
Okay.
We learn English from the very beginning. It's now main second language for the people born like me. Since let's say 1990, 1989, before English was not very popular, we had Russian as a second language because we were closer to Russia. But plenty of people in Poland knows English, even if they don't want to communicate. They may be shy, but they understand it. And we have plenty of things, electronic devices with English menus on them. So we can speak English. Not everybody. I was surprised, for example, in Portugal. I went to Portugal. I was in Portugal, by the way, a weekend ago on the LMS race, and I was surprised because you mentioned Spain. In Spain, it's not so easy to talk English. They try to force you to speak Spanish, but in Portugal, which is very close, they speak English really well. Really well.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I actually have another business on the side, and we actually have an engineer that lives in Portugal, and he speaks, of course, Portuguese, Italian, because he's married to an Italian, and English, and Spanish, and French. So, you know, that's one thing that I really think that needs to be promoted more here in the United States, is getting our younger folks to speak more languages. But you know, over here, it's English, right? And if you speak Spanish, then you're Mexican. You might not. It doesn't matter if you're from Argentina or Chile or any of the other Latin American countries. If you speak Spanish, they assume that you're Mexican. But so let's get back to the Formula One racing. So we've had a lot of controversy here over the last few weeks with Red Bull exceeding the boundaries, the budgets. To me, they seem to be building kind of a grey area, and I'm very black and white. I really believe that Red Bull exceeded the budget limits. They should be punished. I think in the beginning, when they set it up, they said that that they would take points away from the driver and points away from the championship cars, so the constructors championship and things like that. So for me, it's very black and white that they should take points away from Max Verstappen from last year, which would probably take away the world title from him, and they should take away points from the Constructors' Championship. Listening to all the news media, we don't believe that's going to happen. So how do you feel about that, and do you agree or disagree with kind of my thinking on that?
I agree with you. I'm also a bit black or white guy, as the flag you've got here, black or white. But it's not so easy. And because of that, it's not so easy, not so obvious. When you're listening, Christian Horner, Red Bull team boss, saying that the regulations has 54 pages, plenty of text, you have to understand and assume that he might be right, saying that they maybe just misinterpreted some of the thing. But the funny thing is that they're the only one team from a 10 teams who did that. So it's like, well, you need to understand his situation, but it sounds very, very weird. Plus, if you see the other team principals' reactions to that, they are very strong on that. Zach Brown even wrote a special letter. It was a big discussion because Zach Brown wrote in the letter, that was a public letter, that if you, let's say, exceeded the budget, you are a cheater because you cheat.
Absolutely,
So
I
if
feel
you
the
do
same
it,
way.
it's a cheating. He didn't say that the Red Bull are cheaters. He said that if you do it, you're a cheater.
Yes.
Christian felt very wrong about this, and you can see right now a bit of political things in here. Christian said that children of our workers have been bullied on the playgrounds because of that we are cheaters, blah, blah, blah. So I believe the whole case is very political. And as you, Jonathan, I don't think they will take away the.
I don't think so. But you know, here in Austin, Texas, probably 10 years ago, let me check with my producer here. I'm thinking of the cyclist. The Tour de France cyclist, Lance Armstrong. We had a Lance Armstrong who found a good way to cheat, let's say, and it was the thing that finally made him admit that he was a cheater was because when he was going to school, his classmates were telling him that his father was a cheater, and his father, up to that point, Lance Armstrong, had said no, no, no. But to make it right for his children, then he came out. So that's an interesting point that Christian Horner brings up about the children. But more to the interesting point is, why is Red Bull the only one that seems to have had a problem with that? It would seem to me that they thought long and hard about how to skirt the rules.
Yes, but not only but we in Poland, or some of us in Poland, thinks that Formula One is a sport of cheaters.
Yes,
because it is.
It is.
But if you give them chance to cheat, they will do it.
Yes.
But this is why there are gray areas. They look for the place in the gray areas and they attack there and cheat there. But well, they're not very bad, or let's say they're not cheating, obviously. They try to cheat, or let's say bend the rules as much as they can, which is fabulous. And I think the bending the rules, laws of physics and all the stuff, this is the spirit of Formula One. I believe that. However, cheating is cheating.
Cheating is cheating.
And if you think about few circumstances, you need to see at the big picture. You've got Red Bull. I'm not saying they're cheaters, but the fight was very close to the really last lap of the race.
The last lap.
The whole procedure was very controversial, and this is one of the reasons we cannot see Michael Masi here right now.
Right.
He's busy somewhere else.
Yeah. Living back home in Australia, by the way.
Yes. So this was the one thing. The second thing was that Max Verstappen during the whole season was sometimes really aggressive driver. Sometimes, I believe, bending the rules of overtaking limited space. But it was fine. It's fine. But it's another circumstance. And then you think about one more situation. Red Bull. They've built a whole new hangar to build engines. Honda says they are quitting.
Correct.
But they did not quit. Red Bull built it. Red Bull is now building their own engine, which is working. They started it, but it's not Honda. And Honda came back to Red Bull right now. So Red Bull basically, and this is only my interpretation, what I may think, found a place to put some money on, because you can spend unlimited amount of money on engines as well as on driver salaries. So theoretically, some people may think that building new hangar to build engines that you are not using actually because you've got Honda deal back is a good way to push some workers there, to pay them above the limits legally, but not sure if they are really working on engines or maybe
other stuff.
Yes. And then you can say one more thing. Adrian Newey, the main person who is drawing the car and do all the plans.
Designs. Yes.
As far as some say, he's not hired. He's got his own company and he's invoicing
He's a contractor.
Yes.
Correct.
It also means that it may be Adrian Newey or some people with Adrian Newey. So I think all these circumstances, when you see Christian Horner saying that all the thing is very complicated, yes, it is, Christian, but it's like you're trying as much as you can, and maybe not always it's working for you. Sorry.
No, but as you mentioned earlier, cheating's been going on a very, very long time, and in fact, the Tyrrell Ford team that Jackie Stewart used to drive for, after Jackie Stewart retired, they went through a period of where they were putting a lead shot into the cars during the race to try and make the weight limits. And it was only because, they put the lead shot in with the water for the cooling, and the lead shot would come out the vent, and everybody was getting covered in lead shot, and they finally found that Tyrrell was cheating. And they were very quick to come down on Tyrrell back then. They took away all the points that they gained that
Which
year.
years were this?
This was about 1992, 93. It was towards the end of Tyrrell's reign in Formula One.
Okay, so the 1990, early 1990s, Michael Schumacher and Benetton traction control issue. Well, it was confirmed that they had the traction control. However, hidden in the car,
yes,
it was confirmed, but nobody could, let's say, confirm that they were using the traction control.
Right.
So they kept the titles and the points.
Right.
So I believe this is a similar case with the Red Bull right now.
Correct. Actually, that's a good analogy. Yes, it's very hard to prove. Yes. So, as we go forward, do you think that we'll ever see a Formula One race in Poland?
No, we won't.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I don't think we don't have the place. We don't have FI accredited racetrack in Poland. We have few of these smaller racetracks, but not like this. Not like the closest race for us is the Budapest, the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Okay, yeah.
And we treat it as our home race basically because Hungary and Poland are very close, not only from the geographical point of view, but we like each other.
Right.
Hungarians and Poles like each other. So we come there to watch Formula One race, or we drive to Germany if there's opportunity. But right now, after pandemic, we plenty of Polish young fans, because I've mentioned we've got young fans from Formula One.
Yes.
Some of them are students, some of them are working for the IT and all the stuff, so they don't see an issue to spend a lot of money and to fly somewhere, spend a week or 2 weeks, let's say, in Italy, see some things, and then watch Formula One race. So right now, Poles are traveling through whole Europe to see races. I don't have a racetrack, and I don't think currently we don't have a potential to use that racetrack.
But all it takes to build a racetrack, we didn't have a racetrack here 10 years ago.
Yes.
All it takes is a couple of rich guys to show up.
How many people live in Texas?
17 million.
17 million?
Yes.
Okay, Texas is the size of Poland. Poland is the size of Texas. We have 38 millions, but I believe right now here you can see more fans of Formula One than in Poland.
You think so?
Maybe.
I find that very interesting because I would say when we look out here, yes, it's become more popular, and I bumped into people from Colorado and other states, but I would venture to guess that a good 30-40% of the people that are here this weekend are from Europe and Mexico. We get a very large number of people from Mexico and other Latin American countries coming in here to this racetrack.
Well, let's say, I wish we're going to have F1 race in Poland, but I don't think it's going to happen in the next 10 years. We need to have at least Formula One driver, and we need to have more money to invest in that sport, because we are not doing it as we should, I think.
Okay.
Because motorsport is something that is really cool, and I think it makes the roads more safer, and everybody are more happy, and I'm that kind of guy who rather we're gonna build a racetrack than race tickets or something like this to put the spinning on the racetracks.
Well, we're glad that you visited with us here today, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
You're gonna have to promise me one thing.
Okay, we can promise.
Okay, if I come to the States next year, Miami, we're gonna meet there.
That's a promise that we can keep. That's a promise we can keep, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
And
Thanks for having me.
One thing we're going to do is Andre, our producer, is going to put your URL along the bottom of this podcast, so that all of the fans here in the US can, and there's a lot of Polish people live here in the US, and they can click into your podcast.
And they need to speak Polish to understand it.
That's okay. A lot of Polish people here that speak Polish. My twins are swimmers, and they are actually swimming with a little girl from Poland. So
fabulous.
There you go. You've got at least one fan.
Fabulous. So guys, if you want to listen to our podcast, you can just put Budnik i Pokrzywiński at YouTube, or find us at our website called Park Fair May. It's very easy to find, because parkfair.ma, like you spell the Park Fair May, is our domain, and we are in Polish, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, whatever you like, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, every single media place that we can be, we are. And thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.